Good afternoon. How are you? It's Alan. Guess what? You don't know me. It was this past year marked 18 years for me. 18 years. It's a long time. Since I left the evangelical church and became a Roman Catholic. And it still amazes me to this day how many people will say, oh, I was a Catholic at one point, but I became Christian. It aggravates me to no end. I don't blame the people, honestly, because it's just what they've been taught. So to give you a little backstory, when I was an evangelical, I grew up in a non-denominational evangelical church, charismatic type of a church. We spoke in tongues, all of this and that. We were very heavy in the gifts of the Spirit and music and stuff like that. And at some point, if you guys are interested, I can go into it and tell you a little bit of reasons why I left. I left the evangelical church in 2002 and spent about 3 years in the PCA, which is the Presbyterian Church of America, which, if memory serves me correct, is the more conservative arm of the Presbyterian Church. There are a number of Presbyterian churches. They call them the split peas. But I spent 3 years in the Presbyterian Church before I became Roman Catholic. So that's sort of my journey. If y'all are interested, I can tell you more about it. But there were certain reasons why I left. But since I left, I keep hearing this. And it's odd because during that time frame, probably for 3 or 4 years, I went to a Bible college and studied theology and studied the Bible and things of that nature. It wasn't formal, it wasn't anything in depth, but all through my years, I do remember that there was definitely an anti-Catholic bent. I would not say that the churches that I grew up in were rabid anti-Catholic, but they were not pro-Catholic, if you get what I'm saying. So there were a lot of teachings in the Catholic Church that they didn't agree with, but also there was not a lot of church history taught. And when I say church history, I mean prior to 1517. So in 1517, if you guys are not familiar, that was the date when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses on the Wittenberg door in Germany of his grievances with the Catholic Church. Now, granted, there have always been issues in the Catholic Church that needed to be reformed. There are today, and there ever will be, issues in the Catholic Church which need reform. The Catholic Church, along with any other church, is never going to not need reform, period. That part of church history was pretty bad. It was in the Dark Ages, or coming out of the Dark Ages, and there was a Pope Leo who was selling indulgences. We can talk about indulgences later at some point, but he was selling basically get out of purgatory cards to build churches. So Martin Luther, that was really what ticked him off, and he said that the church is in need of reform, which it absolutely positively was. And what wound up happening was he basically started the Protestant Reformation, which said we don't need the church, we don't need the Pope, all you need is the Bible, all you need is Jesus, this and that and the other. But what is interesting is, if you go all the way back to when Christ founded the church, when did he found the church? Well, when he actually founded the church was in Matthew 16, where he told Peter, he said, you are now Peter, which means rock. And upon this rock, which is implied Peter, I will build my church. and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Then you move on into Acts. You have the descent of the Holy Spirit. That was really when the church was given the gift of the Holy Spirit. Pentecost is often called the birthday of the church. And from that point, you had the apostles that went out into all these different parts of the world. You had St. Mark that went to Alexandria. You had St. Andrew, which went to Constantinople to start a church there. You had the center of Jerusalem, which was the church there. You had Rome. You had 5 churches, 5 basic churches in the ancient Christian world, which were the center of the Christian church. So you had Antioch, you had Alexandria, you had Constantinople, you had Jerusalem, and you had Rome. From those 5 cities is where ancient Christianity exploded. Moving on until then, you really start to see the church operating as one. There was not, quote, a Roman Catholic Church at that point. That sort of developed towards the first century, where you had the Orthodox split. It was the Great Schism, and again, there were a lot of reasons why the Orthodox split from the Roman Catholic. But what's interesting about that is, even though there's a schism now between the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, they still hold valid orders, holy orders, because they still fall under that apostolic succession. So when the original apostles went out into these 5 centers of Christianity, and they were ordaining bishops and they were ordaining priests, every priest in the Orthodox and Catholic Church now can follow their roots back to the original 12 apostles. Every pope in the Catholic Church can follow his route back to St. Peter, which is incredible. 2,000 years, unbroken apostolic succession. So I say all that to say, when people say, oh, I used to be Catholic, but I'm Christian, you were Christian all along. Now you've left Catholicism, which the Catholic Church, there's no way around it. The Catholic Church holds the fullness of truth for the Christian faith. If you want 100% of the Christian faith, you need to become Catholic. Having said that, that doesn't mean that other Christian denominations are not saved or they're not going to heaven. The Catholic Church, by the way, does not teach that. But if you want the fullness of the Christian church, then there's where the Catholic Church lies. So, yeah, Catholics are Christians. We are actually the original ones. So, I'll be delving more into some of this stuff later on, but that's just something to think on for a little bit.